So good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen and dear colleagues. Welcome to the side event to the All-Atlantic Research Ocean Alliance ministerial meeting. This is the side event dedicated to polar research. My name is Nicole Biebow. I'm working at the Alfred Wegener Institute for Polar Marine Research in Germany, and I'm leading there the International Cooperation Unit and the two EU projects, the EU-PolarNet, which is co-organizer, and the Arctic Research Icebreaker Consortium, of which Renuka will inform you later. We are organizing this workshop jointly together with my colleague Renuka Badhe. Renuka will speak later on. Renuka is the executive secretary of the European Polar Board and certainly well known to most of you. Again, it's my pleasure to welcome you here at this first workshop on polar research within the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance. Before I will provide you some housekeeping information and a bit background for this workshop, I would quickly like to introduce the two co-organizers, the EPB and EU-PolarNet, because I'm not sure if everybody knows what it is and what especially the difference is. So the European Polar Board is an independent organization which focuses on major strategic priorities in the Arctic and Antarctic. Its members include research institutes, logistic operators, but also funding agency, academies, and government ministries. And you can call the EPB in a few words, the voice of European polar research. EU-PolarNet is an EU project, so it has a limited lifetime. It's funded in the current framework program Horizon, in the former framework program Horizon 2020, already in its second phase. So we are working since more than 5 years together. And we are coordination and support action, which means that we are mainly implemented to support the European Commission in defining, for example, polar research priorities of European interest, or in giving advice to decision makers on issues related to the polar regions. Both the EPB and EU-PolarNet are very closely cooperating on all levels, and we also share the same goals. We would like to do whatever possible to support polar research at all levels. As I said before, this is the first attempt to include the cold and icy ends of the Atlantic Ocean into the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance, which calls itself From Pole to Pole. We have the first workshop we thought should focus on infrastructures and how we could make them accessible to all Atlantic partners, and how we could share our facilities in the polar areas. We have chosen this topic because every polar researcher needs access to excellent infrastructure to perform excellent science. And with infrastructure, we are meaning, of course, research stations, polar icebreakers, but we also mean observatories or even little huts in the middle of nowhere in the Antarctic or in the Arctic. So it's covering everything. And this is when all of you know, or most of you know, when you're working together on a ship or in a station, you develop the brilliant research ideas. And that's why we think that starting this discussion about sharing and maybe cooperating in terms of access, not only to infrastructures, but also joint logistics, might be a good kickoff for a closer cooperation within the All-Atlantic Research Alliance. I will give you now, before we start with the first speaker, a few housekeeping information. So we record these webinars, and we will also produce minutes. We have switched the microphones and cameras of the audience are automatically switched off, but we can switch them on for the discussion session. In case you have any troubles technically, please drop a message in the chat and we will try to help you. In case you have questions, and we hope you have a lot, please post them also in the chat, and the speakers will either answer directly to your questions, or we will discuss this later on then jointly in the discussion sessions. And then for us, it would be very important to know who is attending. It would be very nice if we don't have the time to make an introduction round. We are currently more than 50 attendees, so that's too much. So it would be really nice if you could type in your name, affiliation, and especially also country where you're coming from in the chat box, so that we have a bit better overview who is here in the audience. And with this information, I hope I have not forgotten something very important. I think we should start with our first part of the session, which is on introduction to the polar research programs of those all-Atlantic partners who are doing polar research. The second part then will give you a bit more best practice examples, what we have already achieved in terms of access of infrastructures and joint logistics. The second part will then be shared by my colleague Renuka Badhe from the European Polar Board. The first speaker of today is Jefferson Simões from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. Jefferson will give us an introduction to the Brazilian Polar Program, and I'm looking forward to listen to you, Jefferson. The floor is yours.
Oh, good morning, everyone, and thank you for giving the opportunity to talk a little bit about our research in Antarctica, and in fact, we are extended that to the Arctic as well. I mean, just need to share my presentation. Just a sec. Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, and so just a second. I'm talking here on behalf of the Brazilian Minister of Science and Technology and Innovation. We have a general coordination of science of ocean, Antarctica, and geosciences. And I'm also the general coordinator of the Brazilian National Institute for Science and Technology of the Cryosphere. I will talk about that later. Of course, we have a deep interest in intensify cooperation between national and international research networks, not only for our research projects, to join scientific projects, but we still have to exchange students, PhD students, for capacity development, mainly on topics that we still lack some knowledge. For example, in the Arctic oceanography and Arctic changes. And of course, we have the same goals of the United Nations goals for the next years for social implementation of topics that are important. Just having some problem here, why it doesn't go ahead. Okay.
Can you click with your mouse? Now it goes.
Okay. Now it goes. Okay. The first thing I would like to talk is about our available infrastructure on the Brazilian Antarctic Program. The Brazilian Antarctic Program has been going on now for 39 years, and our main activities are in the ocean and on the region near the coast, the maritime Antarctica, of course, in the peninsula, and also a little bit on the Weddell Sea. But the most important aspect about the structure related to science, not logistics, is that for the last 11 years, we have a National Institute of Science of Technology of Cryosphere. Our main interest is not only the Antarctica, we have research in the Arctic, and we have now some students working for PhDs in Canada, for example, and naturally, the Andes and the changes in the glaciers of the Andes are becoming a very important topic for all South America countries. So we are paying attention on that. I would like to emphasize that the thing that we call INCT of the cryosphere, it's a network of more of 20 universities and research institutes under the umbrella of the Brazilian National Research Council and other regional science foundations. And we have managed with that to cooperate with quite a several nations, and some of them from Europe, and to develop 3 main lines of research that we have in the strategic plan for the 2013-2022 period in Brazil. And they are here. You can see that we have some points in common with our colleagues from the other side of the Atlantic. And it's becoming more and more important, the role of the Antarctic ice in the environment system and in the interactions with the climate of South America. We are beginning to have signs of changes that are reflected over here, over the formation of the cold fronts, the question of the solar ocean availability, the paleoclimatic changes since the last glacial maximum. It's quite significant for us. And of course, we cannot forget that the Antarctic geological evolution and its role in the South Atlantic geology is essential for our marine resources in the shelves of our countries and other countries in the eastern coast of South America. Just a sec. Oops. So, what we have is of infrastructure. The logistics is supported by the Brazilian Navy through the Brazilian Antarctic Program. And our main ship, research ship, is the Maximiano. It's a vessel of about 97 meters long with a quite comprehensive set of oceanographic equipment. It has been our main working horse in Antarctica. And for that, we have cooperated with different research groups, both people working with us, researchers that have been working with the Brazilian Antarctic Program, and vice versa. In Europe, I would like to emphasize our cooperation with Germany. We had students at AVI, we have joint research work in the past, and also in Portugal, we have some work, but more on the permafrost. And one thing important is that also we would like to increase our cooperation to strength inside of the BRICS countries. Okay. If you want to see more on that, about the structure of the Brazilian Antarctic Program, the science that we carry out over there, this is the site at the Brazilian Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovations. And just to talk a little bit about science and who does what, our main research group on the Southern Ocean oceanography, and of course it includes the Antarctic sea ice. It's a group of high latitude oceanography at the Federal University of Rio Grande, in the southmost port of Brazil. I think that's less than 200 kilometers from the border with Uruguay. And as you can see from the map, our interest goes beyond the northern of the Antarctic Peninsula. That's the one point that I would like to call attention, is that we have a major interest on the confluence of the Falklands, Malvinas, Brazilian current. Of course, is quite important on the climate variability of the southernmost part of Brazil. And the main research areas of interest nowadays for us on oceanographic research of the polar oceans are in this transparency, go from the physical and polar oceanography to marine biochemistry and ecosystem. For the South Atlantic, extended out of the Southern Ocean, as I told you, the confluence of Falklands and Malvinas is important. The paleoclimatic evolution of the Southern Ocean, South Atlantic, it's becoming quite interesting from our point of view. And I would like finally to emphasize that we are paying nowadays quite attention to these changes in the Arctic Ocean. For example, the fast sea ice extent, and we are beginning to see the first signals of these changes to the tropical Atlantic Ocean and maybe to the South America climate. So teleconnections between the Arctic and the tropical Atlantic, it's become a key topic for us, and we are paying attention to that. So that's my short presentation, and of course, I can answer any question.
Thank you very much, Jefferson. That was very interesting for me to see what Brazil does in terms of polar research. And I hope that some of the colleagues will post the questions to you via the chat. We will move on with the next speaker. We will jump over the Atlantic Ocean now to South Africa. The next speaker is Marcello Vichi. He is from the University of Cape Town. And I think he will speak a bit about the South African polar research infrastructure, as far as I know. Marcello, it's your turn now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you for inviting me. Quickly sharing my screen. I hope you can see my presentation. I'm giving this presentation on behalf of a group of people who've been working together with me and co-championing the realization of the South African polar research infrastructure, which is endorsed by two of the main departments overseeing Antarctic science in South Africa, Science and Innovation, and Forestry, Fisheries, and the Environment. I'd like first to give you a quick overview of the South African presence in the polar region, and particularly the Antarctic, subantarctic islands, and the Southern Ocean. This is what we call our family picture. That's the regions that we have been working on. And we, as a country, South Africa recognized the importance of coordinating the infrastructure in Antarctic science as part of the South African research infrastructure roadmap that was developed in 2016 and actually built on the experience of the European infrastructure. There has been an increased government-funded infrastructure capability across several disciplines, but what actually has been realized quite quickly is the lack of internal coordination that was particularly limiting the opportunity to exploit and generate the science and knowledge that was required. So the South African National Antarctic Program, which some of you are certainly aware of, is actually not a single entity. Is a composition of different components, many different players and many different stakeholders, with unfortunately some loose relationship. It also includes the two main departments, the DSI, Department of Science of Innovation, which deals with a SANAP component, the South African National Antarctic Program component of science. It brings it opens the call for science and manages scientific operations, but we also have the SANAP logistics component, which is custodied and managed by the Department of Fishery, Forestry, and the Environment. So we got different high-level strategies at different government levels, and this is where the SAPRI came in. So the SAPRI has been designed after quite a long time of consultation as a consortium hosted at the South African Environmental Observation Network, and that's why our team of people included two designer from the South African Environmental Observation Network. This is already, this infrastructure, sorry, this institution is already experiencing other infrastructure, and the SAPRI objective is mostly to enable a balanced research growth across the polar disciplines, and particularly to maintain the existing observational data sets that have been established by the scientists. It also look at the complexity of polar research, and particularly the fact that it's built on infrastructure of various sizes that follows different investment cycles. And this is a major issue in general, because those different investments and the related infrastructures are custodied by different institutions and different partners, and there's not necessarily continuity and linkages between them. So SAPRI aims at maximizing the return on this investment, and you can think that an African country actually needs to differentiate and control the level of investment in such a way that we can have concurrent exploitation of those infrastructure and a maximization of these investment. What we are hoping is that this novel institution will transform the access and particularly the perception of South African polar regions to a variety of people, not only the scientists, but also the engineers, the learners, the students, government, private business, and civil society in particular. So the SAPRI will directly benefit the governmental strategies for Antarctica and the subantarctic island through enhanced science production, but also will enhance international collaboration. And this is why we are so happy to be here presenting this initiative. It is constructed as a series of integrated facilities, multi-site distributed hubs, which I will be quickly introducing to you. There's a main one on coordination and logistics, which is the one on top of which everything will be created, and this will be hosted by SEON. But a major one is going to be our long-term observation for oceanic systems. It is designed to maintain and consolidate existing multi-partner observational networks that are currently funded through short-term funding cycles. So that means that after 3 years, you may lose everything. This is why we need some longer-term view and strategic view. South Africa has, what you see here, a polar icebreaker, which is a polar class 5, 134 meter long. It can host 100 scientists on quite luxurious accommodations for those of you who had the opportunity to be on board of this one. And it has a mighty crew, as I like to call it, that have resolved so many different situations and helped the scientists quite a lot. The SAPRI will work towards the optimization of the ship as well as the rest of the network and the people working in it, because we would like to integrate the existing network of autonomous observations that has been developed by some component of the scientific research community in South Africa, together with other human capacity observations that rely more on human capacity. And we have to realize that actually we don't really have anything that is completely autonomous. You need people beside that one. But it's not just the ocean, it's also long-term observation on land. The maintenance of those long-term observations has always been a major issue, and this is true for any country, not just for South Africa. This is why we have concerted networks that are helping the various countries to do it. South Africa has got 2 bases, one on Marion Island in the subantarctic island, Prince Edward Islands, and Sane Fours in Dronning Maud Land. We got long time series, particularly of top predators, birds from subantarctic island that are 30 years long, and they are vital for understanding changes in this delicate ecosystem, and we want to preserve them. We also have long-term observations on meteorological conditions and space weather done by the South African Weather Service and the South African Space Agency, done at both bases. So their maintenance is again often mandated to scientists and linked to short-term cycles. A lack of logistics support has actually been quite detrimental for some field of science like glaciology, geology, geomorphology, and we definitely would like the SAPRI to help this, to foster this further in the future. So basically, the value of science generated by the various scientists that we would like to assist through the SAPRI depends on a seamless integration of data which is the collection, transmission, the creation, high-level production and synthesis and dissemination, and people. So the SAPRI recognizes that there's a very relevant polar legacy and potentials of South Africa, particularly in terms of the outreach, the awareness, dissemination, human aspects, and training. So we need to integrate all of this together. This facility, but this has to be done in the 21st century with the fourth industrial revolution. We need to look at the way data are changing and the data flow is changing. So this facility will develop new real-time communication technologies for digital twins, which is rather important. And as I will explain quite soon, we got a kind of separation between the cultural understanding of the polar environment in Africa and the way people are being raised. It's difficult to explain why we need to know what happens in Antarctica for the climate in Africa. So given the remoteness of the polar environment, having the possibility to create digital twins that can be appreciated locally by students, by pupils, by learners and others is quite essential to revolutionize the perception of this science in Africa. Another quite relevant thing to do is to have direct experience of extremely cold conditions. This is a major limitation. The student you see here on the right is from the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's one of the students at the University of Cape Town. He's looking at me, but he's got frostbite and he doesn't know. The reason is that the people from Africa don't have any experience of the Antarctic. And if you think that Antarctica is actually the closest continent to South Africa, it's quite relevant and interesting. So the establishment of a polar laboratory, which will be the first facility of this kind in the African continent, will allow scientists and students from various disciplines to produce science and get training on an environment that they can not access easily. So this facility will be a real training incubator with innovative equipment. So when we were thinking about the SAPRI, we thought about the concept of an orchestra. So we need a concert hall to listen to each other and adequate instruments to express the potential of the various players, the maestro that we have there. But then we looked at the way this is designed. So we got this sort of Westerner-centric approach, top-down hierarchy. You got a director, unidirectional, frontal communication. Well, this is not going to work in Africa. So this is a different way of thinking about an auditorium from Africa. This is a concert hall in Egypt, which is transparency, space for action ideas, 360 degrees circular communication. So we see SAPRI as really a long-term national investment that goes beyond the maintenance of long-term observation and research needs. So it will be done in a series of phases, and we're going to start our phase 1 right now. We'll move into phase 2, which is our running phase, and hopefully everything will be operational after 3 years. And in the longer term, it may be an opportunity to move towards a South African Polar Research Institute. And I'd like to thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcello, for this wonderful presentation and the beautiful pictures you have shown us. Again, I would like to ask the auditorium to put their questions to both speakers, to Jefferson and Marcello, into the chat. And now we continue and we move to the north, I guess. The next speaker is from Canada. It is Alain Dupuis, and he's from Fisheries and Ocean Canada. And he will give us a short did I say something wrong? No. And he will give us a short introduction to the Canadian polar interest. Alain, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm just trying to share my screen at the moment here. I have too much stuff open.
Don't worry, we have time. Enough.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, thank you for inviting us to give an overview of our polar research programs. So as you mentioned, my name is Alain Dupuis. I work for the federal department called Fisheries and Oceans Canada. You know, this talk could be given probably by several different individuals within Canada. You know, because the key point here is that our research is really delivered by multiple partners in the Arctic and also in the Antarctic. So I hope with this presentation I give a bit of an overview of our polar research approach, interest in some of our infrastructure, and also some connection points for international collaboration. All right, so first I wanted to touch on some overarching elements. So I mentioned already, our polar research is really delivered by multiple partners. And so there's no single agency or government or institution that coordinates all of it. So I'll get into that in the next couple of slides. A few years ago, Canada launched the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework. So importantly, this was a document that was co-developed with our Indigenous partners and others. Which acts as a document to guide us when we're developing our programs. And it contains information as well about what priority themes are important for Canadians and in particular Indigenous communities that live in the North. And then the third point here is I've highlighted the agreement on enhancing international Arctic science cooperation. Now, Canada and other Arctic states have signed on to this agreement. Well, I understand this workshop is not dedicated to the Arctic states, but it also include other states. I think what this has done is it's brought together some very useful information that could be applied to any international interest for conducting Arctic research in Canada. And so I'll dive into that, well, not dive into that, but I'll provide the website here. It's a very useful website that's been designed to implement that agreement within Canada. This website, I'll share it in the chat as well after my talk, but provides a lot of information useful for any of you interested in conducting research in Canada. Let's see here. The second point here is that we do have a process for countries interested in conducting research via for their vessels in Canadian waters. This is managed by Global Affairs Canada. And then the third point here that I want to mention is that we do work very closely with our Inuit partners on conducting research in Canada, and this is becoming even more important with increasing capacity for Northerners to conduct their own research. And one recent development is the Inuit SAPRI Kanatami, which is the organization representing Canadian Inuit. They have developed a strategy on research, which is a very important document. I would encourage any of you to have a look at it, which provides guidance for researchers who want to conduct research in the Canadian Arctic on how to approach it and how to engage meaningfully with our Inuit partners. All right, moving on to the multi-partner aspect of research in polar regions. Next few slides really highlight some of our the key players. So this slide here is really just to mention that there's several federal departments and agencies with interest in the Arctic. Fisheries and Oceans Canada, who I'm representing, conducts research to inform our fishery stocks, both fish and marine mammals. We have research programs dedicated to marine conservation. We have programs looking at various ecosystem impacts from shipping to climate change. And we have programs as well that are very focused on oceanographic research and some charting as well. Now I have federal colleagues from Environment and Climate Change Canada, which is also another important federal department in Canada with activities in the north. And we also have Polar Knowledge Canada, which is an agency that has a bit of a coordinating function as well in Canada, and also has operates some important infrastructure that I will get to or introduce to you later in the slides. Here I want to touch on the fact that there's, we do have territories, 3 territories in Arctic Canada who also have their own research priorities. And also every Indigenous community also has interest in the research that's conducted. And so here I provided a short list of some of the key themes that do come up in conversations with some of these colleagues. So there's interest in sustainable economic development. Conservation is also important. Food security is very important for our Indigenous communities. Climate change is an issue that's very important as well. So something that's very important in Canada, as I've already mentioned, is that we do work closely with our Indigenous governments and our communities, Indigenous communities, on delivering our research. So this stems a lot from our modern land claim agreements with the Inuit people, and there's a variety of systems for co-managing our natural resources with Inuit and other Indigenous peoples, and so there's growing involvement of these co-managers and also these Indigenous communities in research and monitoring activities. And so the last point here, I just wanted to mention that there's a few elements of importance to keep in mind if research is conducted with Indigenous people. Early engagement is important. There's growing awareness that we should be aligning our research priorities with Indigenous priorities, and that research is really a partnership that happens not only just at the beginning to get the okay, but really is throughout the process, the research process. And so there's a movement towards developing capacity as well within northern communities to conduct some of the research in partnership. And we're also seeing recently funding through Inuit organizations that are supporting research led entirely by our Indigenous people as well. Of course, the academic community is very important in Canada as well for producing some of this research. Largely is funded by our granting councils. So that the key one here would be the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council of Canada, NSERC. 3 universities are definitely major players: University of Laval, University of Manitoba, and the University of Alberta. I should have mentioned here as well that there are a couple of Arctic colleges that are also involved in research. And we now have a university in the territory of Yukon as well. It used to be a college and now it's been transferred as a university. We have important networks as well. ArcticNet is the largest network in Canada. It brings together scientists and managers in natural, human health, and social sciences with Inuit organizations and northern communities to study climate change, but also other aspects of interest. Edmonton Science here I'll mention as well. It's an independent organization that manages the scientific program of our main research icebreaker, the CCGS Edmonton. And there's also other networks and ENGOs that do exist that have some interest in the Arctic research as well. So moving on to some of our infrastructure, I've already mentioned the Atmanson. So this is our dedicated research icebreaker, and the science program is delivered by the Atmanson Science organization. There are other icebreakers. They're not dedicated for research, but there are some limited days for research as part of their mandate. There's the territory of Nunavut operates a research vessel. So there's a few research vessels as well that are operating in the Arctic that form part of the Canadian infrastructure. So the territory of Nunavut operates the Nuyaluk. And then there is also an organization, an independent organization called the Arctic Research Foundation that operates several research vessels across the Arctic as well. As far as field stations go, we have a few. One major one is the Canadian High Arctic Research Station Campus, CHARS for short. This is operated by Polar Knowledge Canada, federal agency. And I would encourage you to have a look at Polar Knowledge Canada's website for information. They do host scientists from other countries as well to conduct work there. It's a fairly new facility, and so it is, you know, the infrastructure is still being developed as we speak. And I would encourage you, any of you, to have a look at this website from the Canadian Network of Northern Operators. It really gives a comprehensive list of all the research infrastructure that does exist. As far as our international science cooperation, some of the main drivers for us is the Arctic Council. So for us, it's an important forum for cooperation and research, and this is done primarily through the working groups and activities. And so the main, or not, I shouldn't say the main ones, but two of them that we do conduct a lot of our work through is the Conservation for Arctic Flora and Fauna, CAF working group, and also PAIM, the Protection of Arctic Marine Environment working group. So there are also some agreements that also drive some of our scientific interest. One in particular is the agreement to prevent unregulated high seas fisheries in the Central Arctic Ocean. There are 10 parties that have signed onto that agreement, Canada being one of them. And as part of that agreement, there is a scientific body that's been formed, and there is a joint program of scientific research and monitoring that is being developed to support that agreement. And then, you know, just as a high-level point here, like there are many researcher-driven and network-driven projects with international collaborators, with both government and academic researchers across the Arctic. Moving on to the Antarctica, you've noticed that I mostly talked about the Arctic. Canada does not have a lot of involvement in Antarctic research, but we do have non-consultative party. We are a non-consultative party since 1988. We don't have a research station, but our researchers largely collaborate with international partners when conducting work in the Antarctic. And so this is mostly United States, but also researchers from the United Kingdom, Australia, Germany, and France. And I believe that is maybe my last slide. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alain. I have to say I was struggling for so many years getting an overview about the Canadian system. I should have listened to your presentation before. Now I have the overview, and I guess many of us as well. So thank you very much. It was a brilliant overview of Canada, which is a bit more complicated from the European perspective than for example, Germany. So let's go to the final presentation of this first session here. It's now on Renuka, who has the challenge to present the European polar research interest. So we will not focus on any single country, but she will focus or try to give you an overview what Europe does in terms of polar research. Renuka, your challenging task, please.
Thank you very much, Nicole. And yes, you have to bear with me because this is going to go fairly rapid fire as well. And my colleagues will keep pasting some links in the chat box for you to follow up afterwards if you'd like. I would really like to thank all the speakers that came before me that gave a fantastic introduction to all the polar research that's ongoing in the all-Atlantic countries. My task today, like Nicole said, is to introduce you all to polar research from a European perspective. And I will first introduce you to something called the European Polar Research Program, which I will call EPRP from now. And then we will look at a highlight of European infrastructure and logistics that ensure that the science needs that we bring up are met. So the European Polar Research Program is an outcome of a 5-year process of co-design and developing a future agenda for Europe. It really represents a bottom-up community effort, which is building on the challenges and the needs that are raised by all of the stakeholders that are affected by ongoing changes in the polar regions. This, all the people that you see on the screen. So what I'm presenting today is the work of a lot of different people, and the main group. This was the working group that brought the EPRP to fruition. It was chaired by Marie-Noëlle José from CNRS. So the EPRP has been designed using a truly transdisciplinary approach, and it aims to bridge the knowledge gaps in and between natural and social sciences, the economy and society in the polar regions. The goal really was to identify the knowledge gaps that needed to be filled in order to answer the current needs and expectations of European societies regarding the polar regions. European societies include a very wide range of different stakeholders. The challenge was to set up an inclusive approach in the scientific gaps identified by experts, and then the needs in which are communicated by stake and right holders can be put together in order to identify future polar research priorities. The process was quite a long one, as you can imagine. It lasted throughout the first version of EU-PolarNet, which lasted from 2015 to 2020. And the aim was to ensure that scientists and stakeholders held an open dialogue from the very beginning and throughout the process. This co-designing was felt that it was the best way to ensure that both the stakeholder and right holder needs would be fully taken into account for designing the research priorities. The first steps of the process included a detailed stakeholder mapping exercise to start off the stakeholder dialogue. We also ensured that there was no duplication of work that was already previously done. So we basically had the wonderful task of reviewing all of the current documents that dealt with polar research. We reviewed close to 150 publications of national polar strategies, international consortia, and major research clusters. This led to the release in spring 2017 of the synthesis report on prioritized objectives in polar research. I think my colleague will copy the link to this document in the chat box. So moving on from the review, we had to consider two specific objectives of this program. The first was the approach on how to engage in a dialogue with right and stakeholders to collect their needs and translate those needs into research questions. The second challenge was to draft the document and to ensure that we had the widest possible range of expertise to draft this document. So in 2017, we launched the online public consultation to collect feedback from anyone who was interested in the polar regions. The consultation was quite simple. We asked just one question: what are the most important topics in relation to your work and/or everyday life in the polar regions that should be solved by future research? We had also translated this question into several languages to ensure a wide stakeholder input. We had a total of 500 responses from 36 countries. As you can see, we had quite a good spread of topics that our respondents thought were important. In addition to the online questionnaire, we also held many in-person events to ensure that we were interacting with the widest variety of stakeholders. The next step in the process was the production of a set of white papers through the EU-PolarNet project. And these white papers were very successfully received, particularly by policymakers. 4 of these white papers have already informed quite large multi-million euro funding calls in Europe, and the remaining white paper was cross-cutting across multiple calls. Then after the release of these white papers, we started work on the actual EPRP itself, including asking for nominations of experts to participate in that process. And keeping all of that information we had in the previous years, including all of the reports and white papers that I have just shown to you, we started designing and categorizing stakeholder needs against the different overarching research themes. each research need, so this now is the real, this is what we got to at the end of this long process. Each research need is structured with an introduction, several key questions, and the research needs that we had were, the research need 1 was to a better understanding of climate change in the polar regions. Research need 2 was informed weather and climate action. Research need 3 was resilient socio-ecological systems. Research need 4 was prospering communities in the Arctic. Research need 5 was challenges and opportunities in polar operations. And research need 6 was inclusive creation, access, and usage of knowledge. So if you would like to see further details of all these different research needs and all the questions that are considered under each need, please go to the link that is being copied into the text box now by my colleague. And you can definitely have a look at it in more detail there. The whole European Polar Research Program is available as a full document, like I was saying. But we also had a detailed YouTube webinar, which was in summer 2020, and this is also available to view on the EU-PolarNet YouTube channel. So you have 2 options. You can either have a look at the PDF, or you can also listen into the YouTube webinar. So what were the summaries? What were the recommendations in the EPRP? A quick glance at the recommendations. The main aspects that came out of the EPRP were that we need to improve cooperation and coordination of research, observations, and operations to further strengthen polar research in Europe. Improving sharing of knowledge and best practice would improve cooperation among different stakeholders in different regions in Europe and also beyond. We need to improve interoperability and sharing of data, and also improve access to infrastructure and joint activities. And that kind of neatly leads on to what we are doing here now. So we are actually acting on some of the recommendations already. One of these ways that we could also act on the recommendation is to depend on the EPB. The EPB is the European Polar Board. We are an organization that is based in the Netherlands. We are an independent entity, like Nicole had suggested in her introductory talk. The main mission of the EPB is to promote, coordinate, and advance European research in the high latitudes by providing a single collaborative platform for European polar researchers. We are an organization as opposed to EU-PolarNet, which is a project. We do not have an end time. And the EPB aims to strengthen connections with the worldwide polar research community and be the central organization to bodies for collaboration. If anyone wants to collaborate with European polar organizations, the EPB is a great single contact point. One of our main strengths is that we have a composite membership. We have 28 members from 20 countries around Europe, and our members include research institute, logistics operators, funding agencies, scientific academies, and also government ministries from across Europe. Another strength of the EPB is that we work in both the Arctic and Antarctic, like quite a few of the presentations that we have already heard, making us one of the few international organizations to have this unique bipolar view. How does the EPB work? In total, EPB members own, operate, or manage a total of 67 polar research facilities that include stations, field camps, and others. There are, in addition, polar research ships that are specialized for polar operation in polar waters. We also have our EPB members also operate 7 aircraft that are dedicated to polar research, carrying out surveys and providing logistical support to field operations. That is both, again, Arctic and Antarctic. So how does the EPB support international cooperation in polar research? The EPB helps, facilitates, and encourages international cooperation activities, both between and for our members. One of the examples of our work is our action group on infrastructure. And this is a great example of how EPB members coordinate internationally to reach out with different tools and initiatives that promote international cooperation. One of the main things that has been brought out in coordination with EU-PolarNet was the European Polar Infrastructure Catalog and Database. Now this catalog and database will give you a very nice idea of what is available within Europe. We had also partnered with quite a few different organizations and projects for this, including Eurofleet's Interact and Comnap. Some of them you will also hear about in the next part of this webinar. And the European Polar Infrastructure Catalog and Database, both of these things are completely free to access. The catalog is downloadable as a PDF. If you go to the EPB website or follow the link that has been copied into the chat box, you can access all of the information that is available on that database. And with that, I thank you very much. And these are the important links also if you would like to take a screenshot or something. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Renuka. Here's my video. A very nice overview about the EPRP and the work of the EPB. Thank you so much. According to our schedule, we are 2 minutes behind schedule, which is excellent, I have to say. I saw that there's discussion going on in the chat. That's why I would suggest that we now make really this 5 minutes break to have a chance to get a new drink or whatever. And then we will continue shortly after 5, 5 in German time, shortly after 3 with the second part of the session. So 5 minutes, be back very soon, please. Ich muss ganz schnell auf Klo.
Okay, we've had a few minutes off just before we start, and I'd like to say thank you very much, Nicole, and I'll be taking over for this next part of the session, where we will hear quite a few best practice examples for cross-border access to infrastructure and sharing of logistics. A quick request, one notice and one request, because I've seen that quite a few people have joined in after the initial housekeeping rules were announced. We are recording this session and we will make this available on our YouTube channel. We would also really like to know the spread of our attendees. So if you have not done so yet, can you please note down your name and your affiliation and the country where you are attending from into the chat box, please? That would be super useful for us. So we now start with cross-border best practice examples, and the very first talk of this, the second part of this session, is from Gonzalo Vieira, who will be setting the scene and who will be telling us about the recommendations that came through from one of the white papers from EU-PolarNet, which was on infrastructure. So to you, Gonzalo.
Okay, good day, everybody. I hope you can hear me. It's a pleasure to me to present you this communication on the challenge that we had in the framework of the EU-PolarNet, which was the creation of the EU-PolarNet infrastructure white paper. So I'm going to present you the component of the white paper, and essentially the way it links into the next presentations that we are going to see afterwards, associated with mainly to issues associated to access of the infrastructures. The EU-PolarNet infrastructure white paper was the joint work of a large team of 23 authors from 15 institutions all across Europe, which in fact tried to synthesize also the views of other colleagues and other stakeholders which were consulted during the process. So it was, of course, a very complex process, which I will try to synthesize now in this brief presentation. As Renuka has mentioned previously, you can access this white paper at the European Polar Board website or at the EU-PolarNet website. Okay, so I will start the presentation by providing a general framework of what is the European polar infrastructure. I will focus essentially on the stations and also research vessels and aircraft. But in fact, the white paper doesn't tackle only this physical infrastructure that provides support to researchers, but of course there is other types of infrastructure, like those related to observations and data, among others. To give you an overview, the European polar infrastructure is as a complex setup of it is managed by a number of individual countries, European countries, but it has really a very significant footprint, both in the Arctic and also in the Antarctic. It's an impressive number of stations, which are spread essentially in the Atlantic region of the Arctic, with 32 stations, mainly in Scandinavia, Svalbard, also in the Greenland area, and also in Iceland. Run by different countries. You can know more by checking the catalog, the online catalog, where you will have detailed information about each of these stations. And then there are also 32 stations in Antarctica, including the subantarctic islands, as you can see in the map in the lower right corner. Most of the stations, or in fact not most, but many stations are located in the northern tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. But as you can see, stations are spread also around the continent with several key infrastructures, both permanent and also summer-only stations. Europe has also 2 icebreakers and 14 ice-strengthened research vessels. They operate both in Antarctica and in the Arctic, in the Antarctic and in the Arctic. And there is also an aircraft fleet operating at both poles, essentially associated to the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany and the British Antarctic Survey in the UK. So it's a very large number of physical assets which are out there, and of course these interlinks also with different observatories. The European scenario it's very complex, and there are of course different types of challenges that one must face when trying to implement an encompassing European polar research program. One of them is that these infrastructures are, of course, managed and property of national research programs. Some of them are bilateral collaborations, but most of them are national ones. So they will have to answer to national priorities, but and they have also specific characteristics associated to the goals and to the directions for which they were designed. It is very important for EU-PolarNet, for the EPB, and also for these activities that the Commission is trying to implement to secure that there is a stronger research collaboration between the different partners, and also to increase the scientific impacts of this infrastructure. And these can be done, of course, through increased cooperation. One of the objectives is also optimizing the operational costs by reducing the periods when the infrastructures are not being used. And of course, another very important issue is also reducing the environmental footprint of this infrastructure, which, as you know, are, despite the fact that the most recent ones are designed and built in order to have a reduced footprint, some of these infrastructures still have quite significant environmental impact. So it's better usage and interlinkage between the different programs by maximizing its use will, of course, reduce the environmental footprint. And we will also aim at reducing overlaps between different programs, and also to reduce duplication of efforts by coordinating, for instance, vessel operations in specific areas, by doing interdisciplinary programs in different areas, with one good example having been the recent Mosaic campaign. If we have a better use of resources, this of course will lead to these more harmonized actions, as I have mentioned before, linking observations but also science. We will also lead into an improved coordination, and we are also trying to further implement interaction between industry and the private sector, and that's why also in this white paper we had partners from industry, as well as also their engagement in science and in research, for instance, by the use of ships of opportunity to provide booths in observations, and even reaching out areas where sometimes are not feasible within short-term projects. And of course, one of the main goals is to better link research and society interactions. And in fact, although I'm not going to mention much about this in this presentation, I would invite you to have a look at the white paper, because we really address also some societal issues and ways to better involve societies, both local, indigenous communities, and also stakeholders in the research process. For example, with the aim of fostering engagement, also empowering communities, and also by even fostering employment in remote regions. and with this increased, we also aim at improved connectivity with other global networks and systems, and that's also why we are here today within this All-Atlantic context, and having invited also other partners. So the key areas in this white paper are improving coordination, improving transnational access, and improving interoperability. The session will be dealing with transnational access because we believe that this better use of the infrastructures is important, and both transnational access and the sharing are at the cornerstones of the success of our EPRP, as Renuka has presented before. There are several examples of success that will be presented after me. They are shown here in this picture, and the examples which we will show are more focusing at European level. But as you will see, there are also examples that will be presented associated with COMNAP and linked at a broader international level. So what are the key recommendations for transnational access? Some of the problems that the programs that have been implemented up to now are focusing essentially on the Arctic, both at the terrestrial level, but also at the marine level. But in Antarctica, we believe that there is also space, despite, of course, the different type of arena that occurs in Antarctica, that there is space and need for setting up a transnational access scheme to the Antarctic region. This is discussed also in the white paper. We think that, for instance, the Antarctic Peninsula region, with the current setup of stations, can be one good one good region to start with such a scheme. We also recommend that there should be a better use and combination of infrastructures to answer complex and key science questions, and also to foster remote and virtual access, which I'm sure that Margareta will speak a bit about this later, by making use of examples of success in the Arctic, which can be implemented not only in the Arctic, but also in the Antarctic. And I would finish with these slides where I've been playing a bit as a geographer, playing a bit with some map projections, and I've put the Atlantic, since it's where we are focusing. And just to remind you that we should be here in the Azores, in the island of São Miguel. So it's really a pity that we are not able to be here. But to set up the Atlantic in the center scene, in the linkages between the Arctic and the Antarctic. And I was also plotting the stations, the European stations, and as you can see, they really fill up the northern and southern edge of the Atlantic, both in the Arctic Ocean and also in the Southern Ocean. But as a polar community, I think we can really contribute much to better understand the linkages between the Arctic and Antarctic, which is one of the challenges which we are always facing. So as the key ideas, we think it's really important to use this Atlantic arena to increase collaboration, improve science outcomes, better address societal needs, and also reducing the ecological footprint. Also linking with the new EC policies related to these environmental issues. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. I wish we had asked you to make this title for the title slide for the event itself. This is such a wonderful, it's a wonderful way of showing the, from pole to pole aspect of the All-Atlantic, both the All-Atlantic movement itself, but also to show how the poles are linked together through the Atlantic Ocean, particularly.
It was a last night fun that I had yesterday.
Next time I will remember. Anyway, we go on from Gonzalo's brilliant talk to the Arctic now. And we have Veronica Wilmot, who will tell us about cross-border access to Arctic icebreakers through the example of rice. Veronica, please.
You are muted, Veronica. You are muted.
Can you see my slides?
Not yet, but you're unmuted now, which is good.
Yeah,
One step ahead.
That's much better. It's not visible.
No,
my
it
slides?
was visible, but now
Was
not.
before.
No? Okay, then I share again. Sorry. What's wrong here? Is it visible now?
Yes, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so my name is Veronica Wilmot, and I will present the project ARISE, the Arctic Research Icebreaker Consortium. Not only that, I will also talk about Eurofleets and other cruises implemented by this other project. ARISE is a project funded by Horizon 2020, and is a project on infrastructures, on research and innovation action, on integrating activities for starting communities. The ARISE project has 15 partners from 13 different countries, including Canada and US. So the background of ARISE is, let's say it all started, or it started with the project Aurora Borealis, which was a project funded by the Framework Program 7 to generate the strategic, legal and financial and organizational frameworks which were required to commit to the financial resources to the construction and running of the vessel OS research icebreaker Aurora Borealis. The Aurora Borealis was not constructed, but all the framework remained very valid for all the activities we did in the future afterwards. A bit after Aurora Borealis, so in the middle of the time, the first project, Eurofleets, came into the scene. And this project was sharing access to 18 research vessels. So the idea was to make an alliance of European marine infrastructures to meet the needs of research and to offer transnational access to those infrastructures. So it all started with an European dimension, including in Eurofleets 2 with 22 research vessels, which followed. But then we changed the framework program. Horizon 2020 was more open to international partners as well. And ARISE was funded in 2018. ARISE is giving access to 6 research icebreakers in the high Arctic. And a bit after ARISE, Eurofleets Plus was as well funded by the same framework program and giving access to 27 research vessels and 12 marine equipment pieces. So the challenges of marine infrastructure in the Arctic Ocean are that first, they are very expensive. So both in the construction and the operation, we are really talking about very, very high expenses, much more than vessels operating in other regions. For that reason, perhaps there is very few dedicated infrastructure. It's very much demanded. The logistic is very complicated because they are moving as other vessels, but in addition, they are working, most of them, in both poles. So then the transits are very long, so the time on site is usually very short. And the schedules are fixed very well in advance. So because those infrastructures are nationally owned and the access is through national programs, there is little room for international initiatives. And because they follow their own schedule, so they are independent from other international schedules or other vessel schedules. The vessels are operating as well in areas which are logistically suiting, maybe because they have to feed their own national bases in Antarctica, or because the home port is close by in the Arctic. Then the vessels are not optimally used. The operations are very costly, and there is a reduced time in the end as well in operating in the Arctic or in the Antarctic. So the idea is that we should work towards an international leveraging of funds to support these infrastructures in support of international initiatives, giving access to strong polar programs, whether they own and operate an infrastructure or not. But there are many polar programs which are very strong, and they need also access to the polar regions. in order to fulfill European needs in Arctic research, to maximize the economic benefits from sharing resources, and to better use these very costly infrastructures. So we need to facilitate the contribution and participation of scientists from nations which do not own or operate these research icebreakers, or whose infrastructures operate in different regions because of logistic constraints. So it's in this scenario where ARISE enters into scene. And the aim of ARISE is to provide Europe with better capacities for marine-based research in the ice-covered Arctic Ocean by three main pillars. First, better coordinating the existing polar research fleet by offering transnational access to a set of international high Arctic research icebreakers, and by collaborating with the maritime industry in a programs of ships and platforms of opportunity. So in ARISE, we are offering access to 6 research icebreakers, as you see here. 4 of them are Europeans, but I want to highlight that 2 of them are actually non-European icebreakers. This is the research vessel Sikuliak and the Coast Guard Amundsen. Those 2 icebreakers are fully funded by the European Commission, and this is because they are shared in ARISE, and they are shared to the international community. The characteristics of the access through the projects like ARISE or Eurofleets is that there is a single entry portal to apply for any of those vessels, that there is a common evaluation procedure which has been approved by all the operators of all vessels, and that applicants from non-EU countries and non-EU project partners sharing infrastructures are fully funded by the EC. So we also admit PIs and teams which are not European. This slide is from Eurofleets, and it shows the projects that have been funded by Eurofleets 2 and Eurofleets Plus in the areas of North Atlantic, Subarctic, and Antarctica. In this slide, with a focus on the Antarctic region and the Arctic region, we can see the projects that will take place from ARISE. 3 of them have already taken place last year, and we have already 4 cruises scheduled for this year, marked in blue. The points in yellow and green were already shown in the previous slide as they belong to Eurofleets. But as you can see, so we have with ARISE, we are giving access to the very high Arctic. An example of one of the access we have funded through ARISE is this project, DRISE, which was implemented in the Mosaic expedition. Mosaic was the first year-round expedition in the Central Arctic Ocean. I'm sure you all heard about that, with a budget exceeding 140 million. We managed to put 5 participants funded by ARISE in this mega expedition, distributed in 4 Mosaic legs. So we almost covered the full Mosaic time with scientists from ARISE. Another line of action in ARISE is training the next generation of Arctic experts. We also contributed to the Mosaic School, where 20 international masters and PhD students were on board the research vessel Academic Fedorov in the first leg of Mosaic, when this vessel Academic Fedorov was accompanying Polarstern to reach the Central Arctic and to locate the first all the camp bases. All this information, material, videos, etc., from this training activity are available in the website. And we are also going, by the way, that's only a little, in case you're interested in the DRISE expedition, on Friday there is a webinar organized by ARISE where the PI will explain what they did in this ARISE funded cruise. You can find the registration link in the ARISE website. And that's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Veronica. That was a wonderful presentation. We now go from the marine aspect to the terrestrial aspect. And we have next up Margareta Johansson, from Lund University in Sweden, and she will talk about cross-border access to Arctic research stations, the example of Interact. Margareta, please.
Thank you very much, Renuka. I will start to share my screen and hopefully it will work. You let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep, if you put the presentation mode, yeah, perfect.
Okay, great, thank you. First of all, many thanks for inviting me and good afternoon, good morning, or wherever you are, everyone. It's lovely to see many friends online, even though I won't see you in real life. It's better than nothing. So yes, I would like to just say a few things about the cross-border to Arctic research stations tract. As I hope many of you know, but I saw some new faces here as well, so I will be the one who tells you over and over and over and over again that we are a network of 89 research stations. Nicole mentioned in her, she started the meeting that it's everything from huts to big research stations, and that is also true for Interact. So we got large research stations that host more than 100 people, and then we have some research stations that can only maybe host 10 scientists at the same time. So it is a mixture, but as you can see, they are located in all Arctic countries. You can learn more about the research stations on our website. All of them are presented there as an example here. And then, of course, in the station catalog, which is also online. And then, I don't know how many times you've heard this one from me now during the last year when we've been at home. During Corona, when you're fed up, play the card game, Interact card game, and you will learn all about the Interact stations, you know, just as a bonus. You can also learn about the research that is ongoing at the different research stations. We have an Interact GIS where you can go and search at the different research stations, and also a catalog that is available on our website as a PDF file. Yes, so as was mentioned before, we do have transnational access in Interact. And Veronica described what it means, but it basically means that scientists from other countries than the country that is hosting the infrastructure can apply to go to this. We have 53 research stations in Interact 3 that we are now on. We have been doing this since 2011, so more than 10 years now. We have an annual call in September, October, and the decisions will go to the scientists in February and March. So during those 10 years, little more than 10 years that we've been doing this, what has come out of this transnational access program? Well, first of all, we have managed to send more than 1,000 scientists to the field, which we are very proud of course, and that is despite Corona that really screwed up last year's field season. But as you can see, people from, this is basically people where they come from, is the starting dot, and then the flags are where the research stations are located. And as you can see, people are traveling in between the countries, which is the whole idea with transnational access. And of course, as a result, there are many peer-reviewed publications that have been published, and more is of course in the pipeline. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer to analyze your data, and I think we all have that bad conscience on our desk. We are also very glad that we have contributed to science diplomacy, which is of course a fashion word at the moment, but because we have got this very nice pan-Arctic collaboration, I think we have actually contributed to contribute to this. And then of course there are some unique findings that have been found during those transnational access visits. And one of them, many of you have seen this little fellow already, but I am so happy and honored that they named the new species Bombus interactis. So I will continue to show him, just get used to it. But basically a new bumblebee species was found at Tulik Lake research station in Alaska, and it was named after the project. So we are of course extremely grateful and honored for this. If you want to learn more about different projects that have been funded through this transnational access. We have just released our Interact Stories of Arctic Science 2. It's available as a PDF file on our website, and when we can meet again, it will be available as hard copies in Interact booths in the future. But for now, I think we just have to do with the PDF. Or we do have an interactive ebook that we have produced, which we are very, very happy about. So if you happen to have an iPad, then you can go to Apple Store and you can download the interactive ebook that Interact has produced. That is this Stories of Arctic Science, but it is an ebook instead that you and there are many things that you can press on and things that flip and blah, 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 blah. And we are also developing a lot of educational material for schools that is available and will be available more on this interactive ebook. So it will be further produced for Androids as well. So if you don't happen to have iPhone or iPad, just hang in there. We will get that done as well in the future. In addition to transnational access, the physical transnational access, we also have remote access. And this is when staff at the research stations can do the work for the researchers, so they don't need to travel. And of course, this is something we invented long before the corona, but it has been especially useful now during the corona times. We have 33 stations that are doing this, and logistics cost is reimbursed. We have the same call and application process as for the physical transnational access. And of course, this remote access, it helps to reduce environmental footprint, which is a very good thing, and it's cost efficient. But on the other side, it requires relatively simple setup. So it might be, if you should go and measure some heights or something like that, then of course it's something that a remote access can do, but maybe not to initiate a big manipulation experiment or something like that. And then the third modality of transnational access that we do have in Interact is the virtual access. So this is where you can access the data from research stations. And this virtual access single entry point was launched a couple of months ago at the Arctic Science Summit Week. Please visit if you haven't done that. There are quite many data sets, and there will be more data sets. We are at the moment training the system so that it will be able to tag the different data sets in a correct way. But then we will continue to just fill, there will be more data sets available. So please visit this one on a regular basis. And then just finishing up saying that if you're interested in anything to do with Interact, you find most of the information on our website. You can, of course, always contact me, but our website, and then we are on Facebook. Now you all pick out your mobile phones and click like, and I will be super happy, or follow us or whatever. And we are on Twitter and Insta as well. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Margareta. Wonderful presentation. And Anneli has already given the link for Interact in the chat box if anyone would like to follow that up. From the Arctic, we now go to the Antarctic, and we have Antonio Quesada from EMSIN in Spain, who will talk to us about the COMNAP Efficiency Task Force from the Antarctic Peninsula. Antonio?
Thank you very much, Renuka. Let me try to share my screen now. How this will work. Let's see. I hope it is on now. Is it?
Yep, brilliant. Thanks, Antonio.
Thank you very much. So now we go south. I will try to explain a little bit because there are many people in here that they are not familiar with COMNAP. So I will first give a couple of slides on the COMNAP mission, and I will explain a little bit the initiative from COMNAP to optimize the logistics, all the logistic movements in the Antarctic Peninsula. So first of all, let me explain you a couple of things about COMNAP. COMNAP is the Council of the Managers of the National Antarctic Programs, And the mission of this group is mainly just to facilitate science through exchange between the different national programs, different operators, just try to give more security and provide better science for everyone. This is the main aim of CONNAP. CONNAP is a very large organization. We are over 30 members, 6 observer programs. We are meeting every year, and we have a very fun meetings. This is a very activity-driven organization, and it works very well. So at the moment we are having 117 facilities, Antarctic facilities, 86 are stations, of which 68 are open, 40 of them are year-round, and 28 are seasonal. We are moving about 975 people in Antarctica over wintering. See, so these are the logos of all the institutions. So the question was, why do we need to optimize resources? Activity in Antarctica is very well organized. We are talking with each other continuously, and can we do some improvement on the logistics? So this was the question that we set up a few years ago. So we started to think about the situation, and the situation was that a very high proportion of the research costs in Antarctica goes to logistics. You know, as an example, I put the numbers of Spain, and we have 1.5 million euros put into research, and we need to move those 1.5 million, we need 8.5 million in logistics. So it's a big chunk of the money that goes directly to logistics. By the way, most of the data and most of the slides, even the slides, have been prepared by my dear friend Miki Ojeda, who is in the room now, and many thanks to him, because he's not only the slides but also the spirit of all the idea underneath. So the second idea is that if we optimize the resources, we can reduce significantly the carbon footprint of our research. So that's very relevant as well. So we are already, and then the third fact is that we are normally collaborating very friendly and very well, but in some occasions we have scenarios like this, in which in the same bay we have 6, 7, 8 vessels, research vessels, just waiting for boarding people, for doing something. You know that the price of this is very high in terms of carbon, but also in terms of dollars. So this is about $20,000 per day, per ship, per vessel. So this is a big portion of our budget. So the idea was, can we have a kind of organization to reduce that impact in the carbon footprint and to improve, to optimize the activity with the main purpose of leaving that money, providing more money for science instead of logistics. So we organized a small group in the Antarctic Peninsula. Why in the Antarctic Peninsula? Because in the Antarctic Peninsula we are many different programs. We are operating about 18 countries, more than 25 stations, and we are normally operating 9 research vessels in the area. So it's a beautiful scenario for working this kind of collaboration. So we analyzed the situation, and we had potentially 850 birds, and we can move about 200 containers. We have about 1,700 seats in planes in that area, and we have normally about 250 room beds for passengers per day in Antarctica. So it's quite a lot in that region. So it's a very active situation, a lot of interaction between different countries, and a very nice situation. So the idea is, can we reduce the cost? Can we reduce the footprint, the carbon footprint? And therefore, can we increase the science in a sustainable way? So this was the main aim of this project within CONNAP. So we decided to run an activity between the 5 different countries that you have there, Chile, Poland, Korea, Spain, and Turkey. And the idea was just to have only those 5 projects, the programs or countries, just because we were quite different in terms of size and number of assets and number of activity. So I think it was a very good decision just to have a high diverse group of people, of operators, just to see how everything works. So we all have some assets there, and we had, this is if you want to see the activities that we are having and the assets that we are running in the area, just please go to the COPNAF catalog also. So we had some difficulties. The first question that we had in mind, it was the national political questions. Many countries are not very happy about sharing assets with other countries, we thought, but at the end it was not the case. At the end, every single country was very happy of sharing assets with many other countries, independently of the country. So this is science diplomacy again. There was another problem with sharing things. If we are sharing things and we are paying the cost of that sharing, we may have problems in terms of money exchange. It's very difficult that one country pays $200,000 to another country. Paying invoices between countries is very complicated in diplomatic way. Also, we were thinking about how to balance the budget between unequal parties. Some countries are moving a huge amount of people, a lot of vessels, a lot of activity, very long seasons, and some others are very small. So how can we balance this? And also another difficulty that we had is that bilateral agreements are working very well after already 40 or 50 years in Antarctica. So this is, why should we invent anything for that? Can we think about something? So because of that, we took the idea of OFEG. This is a European idea also of a change of oceanographic assets, that it was, it's working very well, and it is based in a exchange of a lot of different ships and equipment for oceanography, not in polar regions, but in all the other seas. And what they do is that they agree on a number of points per utilization of every asset. So we thought, okay, not only the vessels, but also the instruments. So we thought, wow, this is a very good idea. Why should not go through that direction also in Antarctica, at least in the Antarctic Peninsula? And this is what we did. So in here, for instance, you have a very nice story. This is ROPS from Portugal on a Spanish ship, and I think it was operated by UK people. Or in here, for instance, we have a British ship, and we have our seismic sensors and hydrophones from Spain, and operated by other people. So can we import that model into the Antarctic Peninsula region? How do we do it? This is the main point. So we decided, we agreed, again, thanks to Mickey, because he put all that in order and he made all the calculations. And we used one seat in a flight as the single point, at the unit, monetary unit. And then we started to calculate the cost of the different activities, and we all agreed in this kind of organization of points. Having points instead of money is very important, because with that we can balance without paying any money from one country to another country. So we believe that this is a very good solution for this kind of organization. So we did a kind of simulations to see how everything would work. It was just a simulation to see the real numbers that we had before. It was before, and we found that we had about 600 empty seats in the planes. We had room for over 100 containers unused. And this means that if we would have used that space, we would have saved about $1.5 million per season. So this is a significant amount that if we put it in science would be much, much better. So the problem is that we need to do a very advanced planning, and every country has different calendars, but we can do it, we can manage. Can we really share logistic resources? And also we need to set up a system to balance the points owned by every country. So at the end, we did a real scenario in which we find these are the real numbers between the 5 countries, and we found that finally this little red number that you have on your right side is about $600,000 that were saved in only one season without doing any effort. This is only by sharing. So I think that it was a very good idea. And just to finish up, because I think that it's getting longer than expected. So we have developed a logistic exchange tool, and we are thinking about expanding that tool and that program to every program that wants to be involved in this kind of sharing resources. We had problems. We had the Corona problem that stopped all the program. We had to park our system a little bit aside by the moment. But after looking at all the problems that we are having last 2 years, we have found that, in fact, the best solution for everything is collaboration. The collaboration is the only way of getting things done in the polar regions. And with that, I say thank you.
Thank you very much, Antonio. And thanks for your wonderful presentation. We have a short while now, and I'm just going to share the screen. Give me a second, please. We will move into the discussion session now, and we have a simple question for all of you. The group discussion is on the challenges, best practices, and next steps to facilitate an all-Atlantic cooperation in polar research. You have seen all of the amazing examples that we've already presented in the last few talks. So the question to everyone here, all of the speakers, how should we move beyond the identified challenges to facilitate further sharing of infrastructure and logistics in the polar region? And it would be great to have your ideas. All of the speakers, please feel free to switch your videos on, and we can have a little bit of a discussion. Nicole, do you want to do a few sentences?
Yeah, maybe I should start with a few sentences. So we have overloaded you now with a lot of presentations, but our intention was to also show to those who are not so familiar with especially the European programs that this sharing of infrastructure or also logistics, both works well already. It can be implemented in the Arctic Interact with these 96 stations, or also the long history of the sharing of vessels within the EU projects is a good example. And for us, as a first initiative in this All-Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance framework, we thought we should discuss if we could not think about widening these networks or transferring these networks, which have proven to be successful, for example, in the Arctic, also to the Southern Hemisphere, to cover both poles, and of course also invite those who are not yet members in the Northern Hemisphere to contribute more and to engage themselves more in these networks. That was first of all, our intention with the presentations we have provided. And we also see this as, of course, as a kickoff. You know, this is now, it was a day of information, of a lot of information, but we also have to maybe get some ideas in place in the last few minutes, how we could continue with that. I'm quiet now.
I think Vito has a question ready there. Vito, would you like to?
More than question, I address my video just for the, I believe, very few people that doesn't know me, but okay, so several points. This presentation presents a very different situation. Arctic is very different from Antarctic. We have the deal to operate on land or on the seas can also have a very big difference. So it's important to understand which are the differences. Because, for example, last presentation, so how we transform in Antarctica the more structured, a common activity. So we have the European Polar Program as a way to design a scientific program, priorities, and we try to push the people to coordinate better. How we can do this in Antarctica, the SCAR can move in this direction. But the presentation by Antonio just indicate then, okay, when you have on place national activities, we can try to coordinate better the logistics to save money and use better the resources. But this is different with respect to develop infrastructure to develop better science. So science come before then to say, okay, I have a lot of space on the ship or a lot of beds in the station, I can use more than I'm using at the moment. So this is a different way. So we have a lot of, it's important to identify the question and address the challenge then each question are posing. The example present a very broad, different situation, and we should start to classify from case by case which are the challenges, because otherwise it's difficult. Because we face with aspects that sometimes are not relevant, other times fundamental. Okay, so this is my idea. Then we should try to identify the direction where we like to move, and we need to. The priority is to bring Antarctic much more near to the situation we have in the Arctic.
Great, thank you so much, Vito, for those comments. I think, because you were speaking about how to bring the Arctic and Antarctic together, I'm going to invite a quick couple of comments from Margareta on the best practices from Interact that you have learned in the Arctic that you can pass on to the Antarctic colleagues, maybe. That would be a good.
Thank you, Renuka. I'm not sure that I'm contributing with so many wise words at the moment, but never mind, I will do my very best. I think the greatest challenge is the long-term sustainability, isn't it? I mean, I think we have a quite well-working system where we can apply and all of that. So we are super duper happy about that. But of course, we always only know what will be going on for another couple of years. And I think what we have tried to do within Interact is to start a non-profit association. I mean, we are hoping that there will be future possibilities to apply for EU grant to get this long-term sustainability that is needed. But if there will be a gap somewhere, we can still keep the network together, which I think is an important thing. So I think that is the only thing I have to add.
Great, thank you so much, Margareta. I think we had a couple of raised hands before from Veronica and Antonio, and then maybe I can ask Marcello and Alain to give us a few of their comments afterwards. Thanks, Veronica.
Thank you, Renuka. Yes, I wanted to mention that I have shown in the presentation for Arise cruises that have taken place in the Arctic in the frame of Arise, but also in the Antarctic. And I wanted to mention that of course, many of the vessels that are operating in the Arctic are as well operating in the Antarctica, and many of the polar programs have a bipolar perspective. So it actually makes sense that we try to join both regions in some sort of transnational access activity because of that, because we will be serving very strong polar programs which have interest in both poles. Even though the vessels, some vessels are only operating in the Antarctica, others will only be exclusively operating in the Arctic, but there is also a lot of common interest embedded in the national priorities.
Great, thanks, Veronica. That's a brilliant point. Yes, even within the EPB members, I've seen that a lot of the programs are bipolar in their interests. Antonio, you had a comment, quick comment?
Yes, this is a very quick comment. So the idea is that in Europe, we are all very used to share and to collaborate one country with each other. But this is not the case with outside Europe. So it's not easy to go to Russia, to go to Canada, to the Arctic, or to go to other places. You have to deal with many, many, many barriers, many frontiers. So I think that we are demonstrating the world that collaboration is a fact. We can do it easily, both poles. And this is not complicated, but has to be a culture, has to be in our footprint. The idea of collaboration in the polar region should be something, as Margareta said, should be something for the future. It has to be always sustainable exchange. And this should be a must for all the programs. It's not something that can last for 3 years or something like that, a project. This is why I agree absolutely with Vito. We don't need to think only about programs, but programs, scientific programs, I mean, but also operation programs. So those are different levels, different thresholds, and we need to think about that.
Brilliant, thanks, Antonio. And I think this brings me on to invite my colleagues from South Africa and Canada. Maybe you have some comments, and also Jefferson from Brazil. Maybe we could hear from you as well.
Yeah, sure. I can go ahead. Just a brief one. Maybe one thing that could be done to reduce some or to break down some of these barriers that have been identified is maybe just continue these conversations and to look at some of these cross-cutting issues, if you will. So we've all presented our own, country perspectives. Maybe the next step would be to look at cross-cutting things. Have presentations by experts to and try to disentangle some of this stuff. Like some of the speakers have provided some fairly complex concepts. Canada, for one, I presented some of our in-country workings with our Indigenous partners, for example, and that's something that maybe I didn't hear from others so much. And that's something maybe a particular may appear very complex to some of our partners here. And so, maybe something like that could help break down some barriers.
Oh, it's a brilliant point. And yeah, we definitely look to Canada for a great example of how to work with Indigenous communities. Jefferson, you had a point, and then maybe Marcello can.
Yeah. Yes, Renuka. I just would like to really support the idea from Vito, because the thing that we need is really to have common questions that interact the two oceans. Well, they are Arctic Ocean and the Southern Ocean, and to go for it, to have it, when you have the identification of those questions, and some are coming out quite fast with the things on environment changes, we are going to be able to identify ways of logistic cooperation and other ways of doing the work together. And sometimes even in the south here, I see, for example, the Brazilian-South African cooperation to the study of the South Atlantic is still quite, is not quite strong. We could do much better. And we have a common interests. And the same thing is going to happen. Some signals are coming out of teleconnections between the Arctic, Antarctica, and Atlantic is the middle. And we must focus on that, just it. And then I think that we can go ahead.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jefferson. I think take those points on board. And I think one of the reasons why I showed you the big process that was involved with the EPRP was to show that this is possible. It is done. It is being done in Europe, where we had this full review of all the priorities that were there, and we invited all the stakeholders to look at what their priorities were and then construct this European Polar Research Program. So it's definitely possible in a regional entity like Europe, and I'm sure it can also be extended beyond that to find what the cross-cutting needs are for different countries, where they can start looking at commonalities for the cooperation. Marcello, maybe you have a few words?
Yeah, just very quickly. I think we have to consider that there's a major difference in single countries with respect to Europe in terms of resources, but also we got a major connotation, a major consideration to be made between Arctic and Antarctica, which is Antarctica is supposedly a continent for science, which brings a lot of diplomacy, of science diplomacy into that. And honestly, if a country has to maintain a footprint in Antarctica, they would do at the expense of science, because logistic is considered more important than science, because logistic means presence. So this is where we actually have to do, and I feel very strongly with Vito and the frustration that many others have, but it's also on a burden for the scientists to really understand that from a governmental point of view, we need to find compromises. We need to find the best way to readjust our science in such a way that it can be maximized within the limits of the resources we got. So it's a matter of coming together in the middle. It's been a long pathway for South Africa. I mean, we started 2-3 years ago with people not wanting to talk to each other. We are divided into many different ministerial departments, and it's difficult even for the different departments to talk to each other, because they want to demonstrate that they are doing the best for maintaining the Antarctic position of the country. So this makes things a bit more difficult, and scientists are in between. It takes a long time conversation, and I feel like the Arctic experience is an important one to use in Antarctica, particularly in terms of the network of facilities you have created, sharing of data, sharing of even portals. I mean, if portal for booking the ships and opportunities and resources, this is something that could be quickly ported and not being reinvented again in the Antarctic space.
Brilliant. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I would just tell you to keep a watch on the European Polar Board website, and maybe we have something in the future to help you out when we are making the next developments to our infrastructure catalog that I was talking about. I think with those interesting points, and I think particularly Marcello, the point that you raised about the policy and the science issues, I think it's if the explanation goes to the scientists in that way, that provide us the best possible science, then we'll provide you the best possible logistics for having, doing science in Antarctica. I think scientists will rise to that challenge. So I'm definitely confident on that. And so I think I'll give the last word to Nicole before I close the session and say thanks on behalf of all of us, both the speakers and the attendees. Nicole?
Yes, thank you very much, Renuka. I don't like to have the last word, but I think I should say something also. We are sitting here as a side event of the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance. That means we have to continue, and I agree with Jefferson and the speakers who spoke before, and in the next step now to identify joint research priorities, which of course connect to the Atlantic Ocean. So that's in this framework very much important. Of course, this can also go beyond the Antarctic Ocean in multilateral corporations. So we will follow up with you. Being a part of the EPRP, the group who did all the work for the research program, it is not a trivial process, and it needs a long breath. But when we narrow it more down to what we can do jointly in terms of research and related logistics and infrastructure sharing, which relates to the priority of the Atlantic Ocean Alliance, then I think we can make a big step forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that basically echoes most of the things that I was supposed to say at the end. And I'm sure that having the lessons learned from the European Polar Research Program, we will be able to help and move this forward with the cooperation of everyone along the Atlantic coast. Not just the countries that have participated today, but also I'm sure we can get more countries interested in this initiative. With that, I would like to say thank you very much to all the speakers who made time to speak in our session. It has been a wonderful session, and I hope, and we will be back with you. We will get in touch with you in order to move this forward, like Nicole said. So thank you very much on behalf of the EPB, on behalf of EU-PolarNet 2, and also from the All-Atlantic Ocean Research Alliance. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.